The soft beeping of the emergency scanner broke the quiet routine aboard the UES Mercy. Lieutenant James Parker rubbed his tired eyes and leaned forward in his chair, double-checking the reading. The signal was unlike anything he had seen before. "Captain Chen," he called through the ship's communication system. "I think you need to see this." Captain Sarah Chen arrived on the bridge moments later, her black hair neatly tied back, and her uniform crisp despite the late hour. She had been serving as the captain of the UES Mercy, Earth's most advanced medical rescue vessel, for 5 years. But even she looked surprised when she saw the readings on Parker's screen. "It's coming from the Andromeda sector," Parker explained, pointing to the blinking dot on the star map. "The signal pattern suggests it's a distress call, but it's not matching any known species in our database." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Dr. Rodriguez," she called to the ship's communication expert, "can you decode it?" Maria Rodriguez, a specialist in alien languages, worked for hours with the ship's computer. Finally, she managed to translate the message, and her face turned pale as she read it. "Captain, it's from a species called the Nexari. Their son is dying," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "They've been sending this message for months to every advanced civilization in the galaxy. But," she paused, checking her translation again, "every single one has refused to help." The bridge crew fell silent. Chen walked to the main viewport, staring at the distant stars. "Show me everything we know about the Nexari," she ordered. The main screen filled with information. The Nexari were a crystalline species, their bodies made of living crystal structures that required very specific conditions to survive. Their planet orbited a dying star, and they had less than 6 months before it would explode, destroying everything in the system. "I can see why others turned them down," the ship's chief engineer commented, reviewing the technical data. "Their biology is completely different from any other known species. They need special radiation levels and electromagnetic fields just to stay alive. No existing ship could transport them." Chen watched as the screen showed messages from other civilizations. The Galactic Council had deemed it too resource-intensive. The Proxima Alliance had called it technically impossible. The Centaurian Empire had simply stated it was not their problem. "How many Nexari are there?" Chen asked quietly. "Around 50,000, Rodriguez answered. "Their entire civilization." Chen straightened her uniform and turned to face her crew. Her dark eyes held a determined look that they all knew well. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we found a species in need of emergency evacuation." "But Captain," her first officer interrupted, "you saw the technical requirements. No one has ever built life support systems that could maintain crystalline life forms. The power requirements alone would be enormous. Even if we tried, we might fail." A small smile appeared on Chen's face. "That's exactly why we have to try, Michael. Because everyone else said it was impossible." She turned to address the entire bridge crew. "Send the message to Earth Command, and then send one to the Nexari. Tell them that humanity has received their call." "And what should we tell them, Captain?" Rodriguez asked, her hands hovering over the communication panel. Chen's voice was firm and clear. "Tell them that help is coming. Tell them that Earth will not turn away." The message was sent, and in that moment, humanity took its first step toward changing the galaxy's understanding of what was possible when compassion met determination. Dr. Yuki Tanaka hadn't slept properly in 3 days. Her small office at the Tokyo Space Research Center was filled with holographic displays showing crystal structures and electromagnetic field patterns. Empty coffee cups littered her desk, evidence of her endless work hours. "The simulations failed again," she muttered, running her fingers through her short black hair. The challenge of keeping crystalline life forms alive during space travel was proving to be as difficult as everyone had claimed. A gentle knock on her door made her look up. Dr. David Cohen, her research partner, stood there with a fresh cup of coffee and a tablet in his hands. "I think I found something interesting," he said, walking over to her desk. "Show me," Yuki said, quickly clearing space on her cluttered desk. David brought up a 3D model of their latest crystal cradle design. "Look what happens when we add a secondary electromagnetic field here," he explained, pointing to the diagram. "It creates a stable pocket that might just work." Their conversation was interrupted by a news broadcast playing on the wall screen. An anchor was reporting on humanity's rescue mission plans. The camera switched to show a Centaurian diplomat, his blue-tinted face wearing what looked like a smirk. "The humans are wasting their time and resources," the diplomat said. "Their primitive technology cannot possibly succeed where our advanced civilization saw no solution." Yuki turned off the screen with an angry gesture. "Let's prove them wrong," she said, turning back to their work. For the next week, research centers across Earth worked together. In Houston, engineers designed new power systems. In Mumbai, crystal experts studied Nexuri biology. In Cairo, spacecraft designers created new transport vessel plans. The breakthrough came on a quiet Tuesday morning. Yuki and David were running their 57th simulation of the day when the computer chimed positively. Both scientists stared at the results in silence. "Run it again," Yuki whispered. David nodded and started the simulation once more. The results were the same. Their crystal cradle design worked. It could maintain the perfect conditions needed to keep a Nexuri alive during space travel. Yuki's hands were shaking as she sent the data to the project leaders. Within hours, the news spread across Earth's scientific community. They had solved what every other civilization had called impossible. But their celebration was short-lived. A priority message arrived from the UES Mercy, still monitoring the Nexuri system. Captain Chen's face appeared on their screen, looking worried. "The star is becoming unstable faster than we expected," she reported. "We don't have 6 months anymore. We barely have 3. Yuki looked at the prototype crystal cradle in her lab, then at the massive manufacturing requirements on her screen. They needed to build enough cradles to save 50,000 Nexari, and now they had to do it in half the time. "Can we do it?" David asked quietly. Yuki stood up, her tired eyes showing new determination. "We have to. We're their only hope." She turned to her computer and began sending messages to manufacturing centers around the world. "We'll need everyone working on this. Every engineer, every factory, every resource we can get." The next day, as the sun rose over Tokyo, production began. Factories that normally made cars started producing crystal cradle parts. Electronics companies switched their assembly lines to make control systems. Spaceports around the world began converting cargo ships for the rescue mission. And somewhere in the Andromeda sector, the Nexuri watched through their quantum communications as the impossible happened. An entire planet united to save them, refusing to accept failure as an option. Commander Marcus Rivera stood in the observation room of Mars Station 1, watching the massive construction efforts taking place in orbit. Dozens of cargo ships floated in space as workers in special suits carefully installed the crystal cradles. The sight would have been impressive enough on its own, but what truly amazed him was the speed at which everyone worked. "Status report," he called through his communication device. "Ship 7 is 70% complete," replied Chief Engineer Sarah Wong. "But we've got a problem with the electromagnetic shielding on Ship 4. Marcus frowned. Ship 4 had been giving them trouble since yesterday. The new technology was difficult to work with, and they were all learning as they went along. He watched as a team of space workers moved carefully around the ship's hull, their suits glowing slightly from the protective fields they had to use. "Commander," an urgent voice called from behind him. He turned to see Lisa Chen, his communication officer, running into the room. "We're receiving a transmission from the Nexuri." The main screen lit up, showing a strange and beautiful sight. The Nexuri appeared as crystalline figures that sparkled with inner light. Their leader, who introduced himself as First Crystal Resonator Zix, spoke in a musical voice that the computers translated. "Humans of Earth," Zix said, "we watch your efforts with what you would call amazement. No other species would attempt what you are doing. Many of our people feared we would fade into stardust, forgotten by the galaxy. But you You work without rest to save those you have never met. Marcus smiled. We couldn't just let you. His response was cut short by a sudden alarm. Emergency in Section 12. Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker. The electromagnetic field generator just overloaded. Marcus rushed to the window. He could see sparks flying from one of the ships. 2 workers were caught in the failing field, their suits starting to lose power. Launch rescue pods, Marcus ordered, but before they could, something unexpected happened. 3 other workers had already started moving toward their trapped companions. Despite the danger from the unstable fields, they pushed forward. Using their suit thrusters, they'd reached the stranded workers and pulled them to safety, just as the field finally failed completely. When they got the injured workers to the medical bay, Marcus visited them. That was dangerous, he told the rescuers. You could have been hurt too. One of the rescuers, a young woman named Amy Torres, looked up at him. Sir, we're here to save an entire species. How could we not save each other too? The next day brought more challenges. A solar flare from the sun damaged some of their construction equipment. Messages arrived from other alien civilizations, still telling them to give up, saying the project was too dangerous. But for every problem, humans found a solution. When they needed more ships, private companies donated their cargo vessels. When they needed more workers, volunteers came from every country on Earth. When they needed more resources, colonies on Mars and the Moon sent everything they could spare. The Nexari watched all of this through their quantum communication link. They saw humans working day and night, saw them helping each other, saw them refusing to give up. In their crystalline forms, they couldn't cry, but they felt emotions just as strongly as any species. We had lost hope, Zix told Marcus during another transmission. We had accepted our fate. But you humans, you taught us to hope again. Marcus looked out at his team still working in space, at the ships taking shape, at the impossible task they were slowly making possible. Hope is what humans do best, he replied. That, and proving nothing is impossible if we work together. A week later, despite all the challenges, despite what every other civilization had said, the rescue fleet was ready to launch. It wasn't perfect, and some systems were only barely completed, but they were out of time. The Nexari's sun was dying faster than ever. As Marcus gave the order to launch, he thought about what Amy had said in the medical bay. They weren't just saving an alien species anymore. They were showing the galaxy what humanity truly stood for. Chief Engineer Amara O'Keefe's hands moved quickly across the control panel as warning lights flashed around her. The rescue fleet had arrived at the Nexari system, but conditions were far worse than their instruments had shown from Earth. Captain Chen, she called through the ship's communication system. The star's radiation is much stronger than we expected. The crystal cradles are holding, but just barely. From the bridge of the lead ship, Captain Sarah Chen watched the dying star through special filters. Its surface bubbled with angry red storms, shooting out dangerous bursts of energy in all directions. They had known it would be bad, but seeing it up close was different. All ships, begin evacuation procedures, she ordered. Transport vessels move in first. Protection ships, form a shield around them. The fleet moved forward like a carefully practiced dance. 20 large transport ships, each carrying hundreds of crystal cradles, approached the crystalline planet. Smaller ships moved around them, using their advanced shields to protect the transports from the star's deadly radiation. On the planet's surface, the Nexari were gathering at designated pickup points. Their crystalline bodies sparkled even in the dim light of their dying sun. Many carried small crystal containers, their most important historical records and cultural artifacts. First transport landing, Amara reported from her station. Crystal cradle systems are. Wait, she frowned at her readings. Captain, we have a problem. The radiation is affecting the cradles more than we thought. They're starting to show signs of stress. Captain Chen's voice remained calm, though her hands tightened on her chair. How many Nexari can we safely transport with the cradles we have? Amara did quick calculations. Maybe 40,000, we'd be risking the rest. That's not good enough, Chen replied firmly. We came for all of them. Find a way. Amara nodded and called her engineering teams together. As they worked to strengthen the crystal cradles, the evacuation continued. Hour after hour, transport ships landed and took off, carrying precious crystal lives into space. Then it happened. A massive solar flare, bigger than any they had seen, burst from the star. 2 transport ships, full of Nexari families, lost power as the electromagnetic wave hit them. Ships 3 and 7 have complete power failure, someone shouted. Their crystal cradles will fail in 10 minutes without power. Captain Chen started to order rescue ships to help, but she stopped when she saw something on her screen. Space-suited figures were already moving through space, pushing off from nearby ships. Engineering teams, led by Amara herself, were spacewalking between the vessels. The radiation levels out there are too high. Chen called through the comm system. Your suits won't protect you for long. 10 minutes is all we need. Amara's voice crackled back. We're not losing anyone today. Through the ship's cameras, everyone watched as the engineering teams worked in space. Their suit radiation meters climbed higher and higher, but they didn't stop. They connected portable power units, redirected energy from their own suits, and slowly, one system at a time, brought the ships back online. When the last transport was loaded, carrying the final group of Nexari, a new problem arose. The star's collapse was accelerating. They could see its surface starting to cave in on itself. All ships, full power to engines, Chen ordered. We need to clear the system's gravity well before that star goes nova. But as the fleet started to move, they realized the transport ships, heavy with their crystal cargo, were too slow. At their current speed, they wouldn't make it far enough before the star exploded. Captain Chen looked at her crew, then at the screen showing the Nexari transport ships. They had come too far to fail now. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Captain Chen. All ships with functional shields move to protect the transports. We're getting everyone out. Together. The fleet of human ships surrounded the slower Nexari transport vessels like a protective shield. Behind them, the dying star continued to collapse, its gravitational pull growing stronger with each passing moment. Hull temperature rising, reported Lieutenant Parker from his station. We're at 80% of maximum tolerance. Captain Chen watched as her fleet moved in perfect formation. Every human ship had positioned itself to protect the transport vessels, using their own shields to block the increasing radiation and heat. Engine power at maximum. Amara called from engineering. Her voice was tired but determined. She hadn't rested since repairing the disabled ships. The transport ships are maintaining speed, but the star's gravity is getting stronger. Through the main viewport, they could see other human ships' outer hulls starting to glow red from the heat. Their own ship shuddered as another gravitational wave hit them. Message from the Nexari transport. Maria Rodriguez announced from communications. First crystal resonator Zix's voice filled the bridge, the translator struggling to keep up with his rapid, musical speech. Human friends, he said, your ships cannot withstand much more of this. Save yourselves. You have already done more than any species has ever done for us. Captain Chen smiled and pressed the communication button. With all respect, First Resonator, that's not how humanity does things. We're all getting out of this together. Suddenly, their sensors detected a massive change in the star. Captain, Parker shouted. The star's core is collapsing. Nova imminent. All ships, emergency power to engines. Chen ordered. Divert power from everything except life support and shields. The fleet pushed forward, their engines glowing bright blue against the darkening space. The transport ships, protected by their human guardians, steadily moved beyond the critical gravity zone. When the star finally exploded, the light was so bright that even their filtered viewports had to darken completely. The shockwave raced toward them like a wall of fire. Impact in 10 seconds. Parker called out. Chen grabbed her chair tightly. All ships, brace for impact. The shockwave hit them with tremendous force. Ships tumbled and spun, but their formation held. Warning alarms blared across every vessel as their shields strained against the blast. For 30 seconds that felt like hours, the fleet endured the Nova's fury. Then, finally, they were through. "Damage report," Chen called out, her voice steady despite everything they'd just survived. "Shields at 5%, Parker replied. "Hull damage on decks 3 through 7. But," he paused, checking his readings carefully, "all ships accounted for. All Nexeri life signs stable. We did it, Captain. We actually did it." A cheer went up across the bridge. Similar celebrations could be heard through their comm system from other ships. They had achieved what every other civilization had called impossible. 3 weeks later, the fleet approached Earth. News of their success had traveled faster than their ships, and the welcome they received was beyond anything they had expected. Ships from various alien civilizations waited in orbit around Earth. The same species that had called their mission foolish now asked to learn from humanity. They wanted to understand how humans had accomplished what they thought was impossible. In a ceremony held at the United Earth headquarters in Geneva, First Resonator Zix spoke to representatives from across the galaxy. His crystalline form sparkled under the lights as the translator conveyed his words. "The humans did not just save our species," he said. "They showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. They showed us that the word impossible only means not yet tried hard enough. They showed us that true civilization is measured not by technological advancement, but by the willingness to help others in need." Captain Chen sat in the audience, listening to his words. Next to her were Amara, still wearing a bandage from her spacewalk injuries, Dr. Tanaka, who had made the crystal cradles possible, and Commander Rivera, who had built the fleet that saved them all. As Zix finished his speech, he made an announcement that would change galactic history. The Nexeri were establishing their new colony, and they had chosen to build it in orbit around Earth. Because, as Zix put it, "We want our children to grow up near the people who taught us the true meaning of courage and compassion." And so humanity's first major act on the galactic stage became a legend, not of military might or technological superiority, but of the simple yet powerful choice to help those in need, no matter the cost or challenge.